Now we are discussing hard disk data access. Previously we discussed how we are writing the data into the hard disk and how we are reading the data from the hard disk. There we explained how we are using the hard disk controller to get the permission and what is the usage of the buffer, how the logic circuit we are using for the electric signal to magnetic signal and magnetic signal to electric signal. All these concepts we discussed. But we are now directly going into the hard disk. This hard disk, it consists of this disk type device. One disk, like the pages of your book. Each disk is placed on top of one. Like example, these disks are placed 10 concentric disks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these concentric disks. Each disk we are calling as platter. Each disk we are calling as platter. You assume these kind of disks, there are 10 kind of disks. We are discussing about the one disk now. The name for this disk is platter. In this platter, this is a single platter, single disk we have taken. We can store the information on top of it and on bottom of it by using the magnetic coating material. Already magnetic coating material is there. We can store the data either side of this platter. In this platter, single platter, we are taking the concentric circles. Concentric circle means for all these circles, the center is same. This inner circle is having less radius compared to the outer circle. But all these circles are there in the single disk, only one platter. So each circle on this platter is called as track. Like when we go to the ground, there are different tracks for the running competition. One has to run on his own track only, such that he will not collide with the another person. So there are multiple tracks. This small circle is one track. This is a track 2. This is a track 3. This is a track 4. In each these track, we are again dividing this track into sector. So this small portion is called as sector. Example here, this is sector 1, sector 2, sector 3, sector 4, sector 5, sector 6, sector 7. Like that, in second track also, here we can observe in between second and third track, we have sectors. What is this sector? This sector is the smallest unit. Here in this sector we can store the 512 bytes of the data. So the electrical equivalent of the 512 byte. Example, 1 byte means 8 bits. Each bit may be 1 or 0. But this is magnetic information. So if we are storing 1, we are storing like south, north. If this is a clockwise magnetic flux line, then 0 we are storing as a anti-clockwise magnetic flux line. So remember, whenever I am saying 512 bytes, we are not directly storing the electric information because you are already familiarized with the byte means it is having 8 bits, bit means it is electrical information. But here we are clearly distinguishing that 1 means it is a magnetic flux in one direction, 0 means magnetic flux in another direction. That's how that information is storing. But how you are saying 512 bytes? equivalent of this magnetic information, the equivalent electric information, we are saying this as a 512 bytes. So each sector can store that much information. It is the smallest unit. Like 1 rupee is the smallest unit of our currency. Like $1 is the smallest unit of the American currency. Similarly, the smallest storage unit on this hard disk on a single platter in a single track, in between one track and second track, we are calling the smallest unit as a sector. This platter is having so many sectors. Here you can see this group of sectors we are calling as a cluster. Group means how many? 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, how many you can say the group. That will be decided by the amount of the information from the storage file. Depending upon that, we are grouping the sectors. So the group of sectors is called as cluster. And you can see the number of sectors in outermost track. Here the track, when we are saying this entire thing, we are calling as one track, you can think. So the number of sectors in outermost track are greater than the number of sectors in the innermost track, obviously, because the radius is less. And here we are using this notation for storing the information. Again we are repeating. We have taken one disk and we are calling that disk as a platter. This platter can store the information on both sides. A magnetic material will be coated for the storing that information. Here each line we are drawing, track 1, track 2, track 3, we are calling this as a tracks. Even though I am writing as a single thin line, it will be having some width there. That's why here between one track and another track you can see this, whatever the space is there. Here we are calling that space as sector. We are dividing each track into many sectors. And a group of sectors we are calling as a cluster. We are having these platters, many platters in the hard disk. So group of these platters is nothing but your storage hard disk. Now the question is, how you are storing the information in the hard disk? In order to store the information in the hard disk, we have to point out a particular sector. In order to point out a particular sector, we require a head. So we are using electromagnetic head because it has to, nobody will be there in the computer to move that head manually. It has to move automatically. So this is an electromagnetic head. This head will be moved to a particular location. Example, if that particular sector is coming into this under this head, then that head will write the information. So this head has to be moved. The electromagnetic head we are taking, in order to move this head, we are using the actuator. So here, actuator we are using to move the head. The actuator, what it is doing, it is moving the head from one place to the another place. In order to move the head, we have to connect that head to the arm. It is like a crane, you assume. Crane, whenever your robotic arm, whenever hand of the robot is moving, we require an arm to move it. Whenever I want to move this chalk piece, I require an arm to move it. This is a chalk piece. This is a motor. This is a arm. This pointing one which is holding is head, example. To this head we connected the arm. So electromagnetic heads are connected to arm. So this chalk piece example is the sector. I am placing my head at the particular sector by using the arm. This arm is connected to this head. But how we move this arm? By using a motor. Okay, head actuator. So by using the head actuator, we will. Now the question is, there are many discs are there. Are these discs are stationary moving? They are moving. We already discussed these are spinning. Who are moving these discs? That is called as a spindle. So these platers are mounted on the spindle. The spindle is moving. How the spindle is moving? Because it is connected to a motor. That is a stepper motor, electric motor. The electric motor is rotating the spindle. That spindle is rotating all the platers. So all these platers are rotating. The head is waiting at a particular position. That particular sector has to come under it. At that time it will write. But we have to move this head from one plater to another plater. In order to move the head from one plater to another plater, we require the arm. And we require the head actuator. So here, this is how read or writing happen into sectors. We already discussed. Where actually writing is happening? What is the smallest unit? Sector. So the read, whenever we want to read the data, we have to read from the sectors. Whenever we have to write the data, we have to write into the sectors. Group of sectors is called as a cluster. These sectors are in each track. These all tracks are nothing but on the plater. Now, whenever we want to read or write, example, we want to write the data into a particular sector, then the head will be placed in a particular track. It will wait the particular track, the sector to come while spinning. We placed the head in a particular track. It is rotating. It will wait for the particular sector. How we will place the head? By using the head actuator. After placing that, it will wait until the sector comes. We can place in the track head, but the sector, it will wait until the sector comes. Once the sector comes, under the head it will write. Similarly, when we want to read the data, here the head is there. We have moved the head into a particular track. Now this track is rotating, means the plater is rotating. On this plater, we have placed the head on a particular track. When a particular sector comes under the head, at that time it will read. So, who is rotating this plater? Spindle. How the spindle is rotating this plater? By using the electric motor. This is how reading or writing happens. We discussed previously, that is how actually outerly it is happening. CPU, whenever it wants to read the data from the hard disk, it will take the permission from the hard disk controller, and the hard disk controller checks and it gives the permission, and after that it will send to the buffer, and the buffer will send the data to the logic circuit. It will convert into electromagnetic signal, magnetic signal. After that, converting into the magnetic signal, when we are this time we are reading. So at that time of the reading, the logic circuit will convert that magnetic signal into equivalent electric signal. That electric signal will be sent to buffer, and that will be read. When we are writing, CPU send the data to the buffer, and the buffer will be sending the data to the hard disk. At that time, the logic control circuit will convert that electric signal to magnetic signal. This magnetic signal will be stored. Now we are saying how that is actually happening in this hard disk. Here we are discussed, there are many platers are there. Each platter is capable of storing the information in the magnetic form on the both sides. Here we have taken one platter. In this platter, we have taken many concentric circles. We call each circle as a track. Now we divided each track into sectors. Sector is the smallest unit which we use for the writing data or reading data. How much data we can store in these 512 bytes? And we discussed 512 bytes means no need to confuse, it is not electric data, it is magnetic information. Now the group of sectors is called as cluster. So these sectors we are using, to read the data, write the data. How the reading or writing will happen? By using a head, we are placing this head at a particular sector. It is not possible to place at a particular sector. We can place at a particular track. So we are placing at a particular track. It is rotating. When the sector comes under it, at that time it will write. When the sector comes under it, at that time it will read. So that's how read or write will happen. See, when it comes under it, the head, when it comes under it, at that time only read or write will happen. Okay. So satellites, if you see, the satellites will rotate. When it comes into our geographical area, at that time it will dump the data. These are the images I have taken for you. At that time we are able to download. That's how here also it is happening. This is how we are writing or reading the data from the hard disk or into the hard disk.